Look at this, my trusted kitchen knife. It has served me well for many years, through countless meals, family gatherings, and quiet mornings. But now, its edge has grown dull. This morning, trying to cut a pineapple felt more like forcing than slicing. Today, I'll show you a simple yet reliable way to bring it back to life. A DIY sharpener you can make at home, with just a little effort and care. Here are 2 small wooden blocks, each a perfect square. Every side measures exactly 4 centimeters, or about 1 9/16 inches if you prefer imperial units. They're simple, sturdy, and perfect for what we're about to do. I've taken the time to prep these blocks in advance so you don't have to sit through the cutting and sanding process in the video. It keeps things moving smoothly and lets us focus on the real work ahead. Let's mark the spots on the surface with a marker, just like I'm doing here. Don't worry, this isn't an art class. The lines don't have to be perfect. What really matters is that you place your marks exactly where you want the drill to go. These small marks act like a simple guide, keeping everything aligned and preventing mistakes later. Take a moment to double-check the spacing and positioning. A little extra care here will save you a lot of trouble once you start drilling. Before drilling, I'm placing a cutting board underneath. Because I love my beautiful table and I don't want it looking like the surface of the moon. Up until now, everything is still very basic. Nothing seems difficult yet. Slide the bolt through the hole and screw the nut on tightly. Once that's secure, add a second nut to lock it in place and prevent any loosening over time. In DIY projects, it's always better to aim for solid and secure. A little extra effort now saves a lot of trouble later. I've also prepared a larger wooden piece, 19.5 centimeters by 8.5 centimeters, which is roughly 7 11/16 inches by 3 3/8 inches for those who prefer working in imperial measurements. Mark the spots you'll drill, then carefully drill through. Slow and steady wins the race, and keeps your holes neat. If you haven't seen one before, this is a threaded rod, basically a long metal rod with continuous threads running along its length, like an extra-long bolt without a head. It's a versatile piece of hardware, commonly used in DIY and woodworking projects because it can be cut to size and secured easily. We're going to insert it into the hole we prepared earlier, but take your time here. Twist it in gently, just enough so it holds firmly, but don't push or screw it all the way through. We want it stable, not sticking out the other side. Now, take a washer and drop it gently over the threaded rod. Next, screw on the first nut by hand, twisting it all the way down until it stops. Once it's seated firmly, grab a pair of pliers and tighten it securely. This first nut will serve as our anchor, keeping the washer and the rod stable and preventing any unwanted movement. After that, add a second nut, but this time, don't tighten it all the way down. Just screw it about halfway. This second nut will give us some flexibility for adjustments later on, so don't rush this step. Take the small wooden setup we prepared earlier, the 2 square blocks with a bolt running through them and secured with nuts, and carefully position it right here where it needs to be attached. Make sure the blocks are aligned properly with the surface so everything sits straight and stable. Once it's in place, take another nut and twist it onto the bolt, tightening it down firmly. Don't rush this step. A secure fit here ensures the entire setup stays steady and won't shift during use. Now, I'm marking 2 points on the wood surface, each about 1.5 centimeters, roughly 5/8 inch, from the edge. Then, we drill right through those points. Next, place washers into the drilled holes. This step is key to holding the knife securely, so watch my hands closely here. Let me tell you a short story while waiting to move on to the next part. My neighbor came over one afternoon, cheerful as always, saying he was cleaning out his garage. He offered to sell me a nearly new set of tools at a surprisingly cheap price, even assuring me that everything worked perfectly. I didn't think much about it and paid right away. But when I tried to use them, the drill spun weakly, and the saw wouldn't even start. Turns out he was just trying to get rid of all the broken stuff to someone a bit too trusting. Lesson learned: no matter how well you know someone, always check carefully before buying. Trust is good, but being careful is better. I've got a small piece of wood, about 9.5 centimeters, 3 3/4 inches, long and 3.5 centimeters, 1 3/8 inches, wide. Mark the drilling spot and drill a hole right there. This little guy is a welding rod. I'm sure many of you watching are already familiar with it. Slide the rod into the hole. If it feels loose, tap it lightly with a hammer for a snug fit. Then, add a small dab of glue right at the joint to lock it in place. Make sure to spread it evenly so it seeps into the tiny gaps, creating a stronger hold. Now, apply some glue to the bottom of the wood block. We're going to stick sandpaper on it. Here, I'm using 400 grit sandpaper, which is just the right level of coarseness for sharpening a kitchen knife. It's fine enough to smooth out the blade without scratching it, but still rough enough to restore a clean, sharp edge. Press the sandpaper firmly onto the glue and trim off any excess. For the other side of the blade, repeat the same process, but this time switch to 1500 grit sandpaper. This higher grit is much finer, which means it will smooth out any tiny scratches left from the earlier sharpening with the 400 grit paper. By gently polishing the edge with the 1500 grit, you're not just sharpening, you're refining the blade to a cleaner, smoother finish, making it glide effortlessly when slicing through food. And there you have it, a small block with two sanding sides, coarse and fine. Just attach it exactly the way I'm showing you, making sure it's secured properly, and then start sharpening your knife with steady, even strokes. Take your time and let the sandpaper do the work rather than applying too much pressure. And remember, once you've established a sharp edge, switch over to the finer grit to polish the blade. That's what gives you that smooth, professional finish. You know, every time I hold a knife in my hand and hear that quiet scrape of steel against sandpaper, there's this feeling I can't quite explain. Calm, heavy, almost sacred. It's like the world slows down for a moment. And every time, without fail, I'm pulled back to the stories my grandfather used to tell. Stories not just about a blade, but about survival, discipline, and the quiet strength that keeps a man standing when everything else around him collapses. My grandfather was a man carved by the old world, lean, quiet, and steady. His face was weathered even in his younger days, his eyes sharp but distant, like they were always watching something far beyond the present. He was barely 20 when war came crashing into his life. At that age, he should have been in love, learning trades, dreaming about building a family. But history doesn't care about dreams. They handed him a rough uniform that didn't quite fit, a battered rifle, and one single steel knife with a wooden handle that bit into his palm the first time he gripped it. He would tell me, with that low, steady voice of his, "It's not about how good a knife looks. It's about whether it works when you need it most." And through those long, brutal years, that knife never left his side. Out there, in the mud, the rain, the cold that cut to the bone, that piece of steel was more than just a tool. It was his lifeline. He used it for everything, slicing rations to share with brothers in arms, cutting strips of cloth into bandages when someone was bleeding out, prying open crates of supplies when seconds mattered, even carving lines of words into bits of wood at night, quiet reminders to himself that home was still out there somewhere, waiting. He said the nights in the trenches were the longest. Not because of the cold, not because of the hunger, but because of the silence. A silence that pressed against your chest, broken only by the occasional whistle of a distant bullet or the muffled cough of someone trying not to cry. And on those nights, when fear crept in and his hands trembled, he'd take out the knife, find a stone, and sharpen it. Slowly, carefully. Sharpening wasn't just for the blade, he told me once. It was for me, to remind myself that I was still here, still steady, still sharp. There's one story he told me that still lingers in my mind. He got separated from his unit during an ambush, gunfire all around, explosions shaking the ground like an angry god. When the smoke cleared, he was alone. No radio, barely any ammunition, just a half-empty canteen and that knife strapped to his side. For 3 nights, the forest became both his enemy and his shelter. The cold bit at his bones, hunger gnawed at his strength, but the knife kept him alive. He cut branches to build a crude shelter, carved traps from the underbrush to catch rabbits, and when the darkness grew unbearable, he struck the blade against stone to spark the faintest fire, keeping the shadows and his fear at bay. The worst enemy, he said, isn't hunger. It isn't the cold. It's fear. Fear eats you from the inside. When fear comes, you find something to do with your hands. Keep them busy. Sharpen the blade. Listen to the sound of steel on stone. Steel doesn't lie. You take care of it, and it'll take care of you. When he finally stumbled back to his unit, days later, they barely recognized him. His uniform was torn, his face gaunt, his eyes deeper, sharper. The knife's edge was chipped and worn, but still sharp enough to slice through rope in one clean motion. When the war finally ended, they gave him a discharge paper and a few coins. But the knife he kept. He brought it home like an old friend, and it never left his side again. He used it for everything. Out in the garden, cutting twine or trimming branches. In the kitchen, slicing meat for the family table. In the shed, prying open crates of seed or carving handles for new tools. As the years rolled on, the blade thinned, the wooden handle cracked and smoothed under the weight of time and work. But it never rusted, never dulled beyond repair. Every month, like clockwork, he'd sit on the porch in the late afternoon light, oil rag in one hand, sharpening stone in the other, working the blade until it gleamed again. A good knife, he'd say, his voice quiet but sure, is like a good man. It doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It just stays ready, steady, sharp, always there when you need it. I'll never forget the day he passed it down to me. I was 16, still loud, still restless, still too young to understand what real strength meant. He pressed that old knife into my palm, the handle worn smooth, the steel marked by decades of life, and said, "This isn't just a knife. It's a reminder. Strength doesn't need to be loud. It's in staying sharp, even when the world tries to grind you down. The steel is cool, almost cold, with that faint metallic scent still lingering in the air. It's not pride, not exactly. As you wipe the blade clean, there's this quiet moment, a pause that feels almost sacred. The cloth glides along the steel, smooth and deliberate, picking up the fine metallic dust left from the sharpening. The blade feels cool, almost alive, humming faintly under your fingertips through the fabric. Silent, sharp, and ready, like it's holding its breath, waiting for the first cut. I may not have tested it yet, but I know for certain, this edge is true, sharper than it has been in a long, long time. The way the blade catches the light, bending it into a clean, straight line that almost glows, tells me everything I need to know. When my fingertip hovers near the edge, not touching, just feeling that thin line of tension in the air, there's this almost invisible bite, the quiet hum of sharp steel that only someone who has sharpened enough knives can truly recognize. The balance is perfect in my hand, steady, solid, and calm, like the knife is an extension of me now. It's not just the sharpness, it's the precision, the control, the smooth consistency along the entire edge, heel to tip. That kind of result doesn't come from chance or luck. It comes from patience, the steady rhythm of every stroke, the subtle pressure changes you make without even thinking, the way your hand learns to listen to the steel over time. I haven't tested it yet, haven't sliced paper into neat ribbons or sent a tomato collapsing under its own weight, but I don't need to. The blade speaks for itself, in its stillness, in its quiet confidence. It doesn't need a demonstration, doesn't need to prove anything, because you can feel the truth in the way it rests in your palm. And just like that, the work is done, a blade reborn, sharp, balanced, and ready for anything. There's a quiet kind of satisfaction in moments like this, knowing the time and care paid off. If you've followed along, you've now got a knife that can handle just about anything in your kitchen. If you found this helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It keeps this channel alive and gives me the drive to share more tips, tricks, and projects with you. And trust me, what's coming next, you won't want to miss.